he's right in relation to civil servants that they don't have a monopoly of wisdom where legislation is concerned. And I must say that I was perturbed that a bill that the Department of Health are speaking about bringing in for the last 4 years, that they weren't ready to accept Senator Burke's bill and to deal with it and have amendments put to it. Now, I don't think the committee stage of the bill will come in next week, but we'll certainly be putting the pressure on the Department of Health to have and put in place a bill which they say that they have practically prepared at this stage there to be brought before the House, or else amend Senator Burke's bill. But I would agree with you that certainly civil servants, some may think that they have a monopoly of wisdom and don't like senators bringing in or members bringing in legislation. Well, it's a matter of fact. They're going to have to live with it, because we've had some very good bills introduced by members of this House from all sides of the House.
Bill which you rejected too.
From all sides of the House, as I stated. And I think that the people in the various departments are going to have to look a lot more carefully to the suggestions and the bills that are introduced by members of this House. Senator Noon and indeed Senator Keane, O'Keefe and Coughlin on obesity levels in children. And as Senator O'Keefe has mentioned, there is a working group on obesity going on at the present time, and we had our own public consultation report and Senator Coughlin's report also, and as he stated, we have a lot of people doing a lot of good work in that area, PE teachers and lots of other groups that are doing tremendous work, but we need a coordinated and a focused effort in this regard. I appreciate the work that Senator Coughlin is doing. I might be able to walk that 5K. I doubt if I'd be able to run it somehow or other, but I'll certainly take up the challenge of walking it. Senator Layden, in relation to the Gardaí, I honestly thought that Senator Layden or Senator O'Brien or somebody was going to come in and answer the question which I asked on Tuesday. The 90 million extra in cuts that were in that recovery plan for the Guards last year, this year and next year, where those cuts were going to come from. But obviously there's no answer to that question there, so you're a bit slow. Maybe you'll have the answer to the extra where those cuts were going to come next week. I challenge you to come back with those cuts there for next week and outline to the Gardaí where you would have put those 90 million extra cuts. Senator Norris, and he's raised the question of the Bethany homes, I would say, on numerous occasions in this House. And I would hope that it would be dealt with under this redress scheme. And I think let's wait for Mr. Justice Quirk to get on with his work and report back, but I would agree that the Bethany homes should be included in that. And it's a matter which Senator Keane, I think, raised as well on the order of business. Senator Hayden, in relation to a policy report on homelessness, which was launched by Minister O'Sullivan, John O'Sullivan, this morning, and certainly invite her in to discuss the findings of that report. Senator O'Claherty, I'd advise Senator O'Claherty that he shouldn't believe everything that he reads in the paper. It's very dangerous to do that. But we'll try and arrange a debate on rural transport with Minister Kelly soon. Senator Brennan, in relation to the audit of speed limits, which were carried out last year, and rightly, as he stated, that a number of the country roads, the limits on those were totally inappropriate. And I will ask the Minister to come in and give us a progress report on that matter. Senator O'Sullivan also for Minister Varadkar that he would come in and deal with the problems which older people have in some railway stations throughout the country. Senator O'Muircheartaigh and indeed Senator Bradford in Conway in relation to the undocumented Irish. And the Taoiseach certainly addressed this matter in the other House yesterday, I know, and the Taoiseach will certainly raise the matter again with President Obama on St. Patrick's Day. And the Taoiseach, when questioned in the other House that we weren't making sufficient effort to deal with the Republican Party, I think that he outlined 6 people in that party that we were having conversations with as well to try and address this situation, which is so important for not alone the undocumented Irish that are in the States, but also the human problems which their families suffer as a result of them not being able to come back for funerals and various other family events. So I think the House can be assured that the Taoiseach and indeed the Taoiseach will do everything possible in order to address this matter over the coming weeks in particular. Senator Mullen on the funding for the public service broadcasting and for a fairer distribution of resources. And I think we all appreciate the work that's done by local radio stations, and they play a very important role in society. And I'll invite Minister Rabbitte to come in on that issue as well. I think there's quite a number of issues that we're looking for Minister Rabbitte to come into the House, but hopefully he might be able to combine some of them in a debate here soon. Senator Mullins, I'll speak to him afterwards there. As I said, I'd be unable to tug out myself for Ballinasloe, but we'll see what we can do. We'll see what we can do in that regard. Senator Borden on the role of grandparents in Irish society. And I think they certainly play a very important role, especially with people, as Senator Byrne has stated, they're babysitting for people that are out working, sons and daughters, and play a very important role in Irish society. Senator Coughlin and the threat to golf tourism and through increased charges, and the Senator has stated that he will raise the matter himself with the Minister for Athlone, and I'll raise that point also with him. Senator, I think that's most of the Senator Coughlin. I think we dealt with in relation to the whole question of obesity and physical education. Thank you for hearing.
Is the other business agreed? Other business agreed. Item 1, motion 10 regarding the Democratic Republic of Congo to be taken without debate. Is the motion agreed? As the leader proposed,
I've been asked by the leader if I would move it, and I'm very happy to do so. I understand it is without debate, but I believe that I'm correct in saying that the full motion will be printed in the record of the House. So it will be taken as read and printed in the record of the House. And I'd like to thank the leader for his generosity and courtesy in this. I think it's very important. This was discussed by the Foreign Affairs Committee. 5.2 million people have died. That puts close to the figure in the Holocaust, and certain specific actions are requested, both by politicians, the international community, and the media. And I hope that this will be useful, and I'm very grateful to the leader, and I'm confident that it will be passed unanimously by this House.
is there a seconder for the motion?
Seconded.
Senator Barrett. Is the motion agreed? Motion agreed. And ask the leader when is it proposed to sit again?
2:30 on Tuesday next.
House, is that agreed? House stands adjourned until 2:30 on Tuesday next.
I would like to welcome you all here to this public consultation committee, and there are three groups who are in public session. There are three groups who are here today before us. We have, in the first group, we have Deirdre Martell of the One Foundation, and you're more than welcome. And when I get a few procedural things out of the way, you're first to start, and you have 15 minutes to make your presentation. That applies to all the presenters of the various groups. Then the second group is Paul O'Hara of Ashoka Ireland, with a number of others. Then you have Sean Coughlin of Social Entrepreneurs Ireland. I propose between the second and last maybe to have a 15-minute sus or break, we have a quorum of members of the committee. One or two people of our own committee, unfortunately, were unable to make it today, and the other, I suppose, point I wish to make is that I have to give priority to the members of the public consultation committee when they're asking questions. I'll try and facilitate everyone, but I would also say that to be brief, I don't want people saying a big statement how good you are. You're very good, because we wouldn't have you here otherwise. But and to ask concise, precise questions, because if somebody rabbits on for 4 or 5 minutes, that's our own members, then it excludes others down the line from asking maybe very pertinent questions. So I would hope that we can all be sensible and be mature in this one. Now, before we start, I have to read into the record a privileged reminder, primarily to our guests and visitors. I have to draw the attention of witnesses to the situation in relation to privilege. Please note that you are protected by absolute privilege in respect of the evidence you are to give to the committee. However, you are directed by the committee to cease giving evidence. If you are directed to cease giving evidence in relation to a particular matter, and you continue to so do, you are entitled thereafter only to a qualified privilege in respect of your evidence. You are directed that only evidence connected with the subject matter of these proceedings is to be given, and you are asked to respect the parliamentary practice to the effect that, where possible, you should not criticise nor make charges against any person or persons or entity by name or in such a way as to make him or it identifiable. So, without any further ado, we're now at 7 minutes past 12. I will ask our first guest, Deirdre Martell, to outline to us your I suppose synopsize your submission and your 15 minutes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much for the invitation to appear before these hearings, and it's exciting to know that the Seanad is taking an interest in the development of social entrepreneurship here in Ireland, so thank you. I'm going to speak just for 15 minutes or maybe a little less on what has One Foundation's role been in the development of social entrepreneurship, and more particularly, why did we choose to get involved in it? What do we think that social entrepreneurship contributes to Ireland? I'm going to go back to 2004 when One Foundation first started to begin that story, when nobody had ever heard the word social entrepreneur before in Ireland. And then I'll move on just a little later to say a bit about the particular role One Foundation has played more recently in terms of providing what we call growth capital into the market, and maybe some of the barriers and opportunities we see for social entrepreneurs today, and how the Seanad might be able to contribute to acting on that. So that's just very briefly. Briefly on One Foundation, we're a private philanthropic foundation that was founded back in 2004. We're funded by one person. His name is Declan Ryan of the Ryanair family. And we provide grant funding in the fields of children and families, youth mental health, the integration of minorities, and of course social entrepreneurship. And the last one, social entrepreneurship, we fund in both Ireland and Vietnam. So we're just 10 years old, and we are a limited life foundation, so that means that we will close at the end of this year. And that informs some of the remarks I'm going to make around some of the opportunities and barriers for social entrepreneurs a little bit later. We believe that we're part of a relay race of philanthropy, and that we've played our part over these 10 years, and that the next generation of philanthropists can pick up the baton from us and play their role. So we're the organisation that really got involved in catalysing the social entrepreneur movement in Ireland right back in 2004. And I wanted to say a little bit about really why did we do that? What did we see going on that made us think this was important and also missing in Ireland? So back in 2004, I went on a learning trip to the USA to try and find out things that I felt I needed to know. And along the way, I heard the term social entrepreneur for the first time. And when you think about it, it's kind of obvious what a social entrepreneur is and why it's important. And I think we all accept now that entrepreneurs are key to a healthy economy and to innovation. And so it seems to me obvious as a result that social entrepreneurs are key to social innovation and to a healthy society and social economy. But if they are so important, why couldn't we see them back in 2004 when we were looking? And yet at the same time, it seemed obvious that of course we had social entrepreneurs in Ireland, even if we didn't have the word, because we're all familiar with people like Mary Davis and Sister Stan and Father Peter McVerry. And they leaped to mind. But what we couldn't see was where were the next generation of social entrepreneurs? And when I was looking around at that time, I was saying, where are the people my age who are coming up behind them? And also, where are the young entrepreneurs? Where are the college graduates or even the teenagers? I couldn't see them emerging as the next generation of leadership to come behind the social entrepreneurs who got involved more in the 60s and 70s. And I was very well networked in the social sector from my backgrounds working in Oxfam and Barnardo's, but I just couldn't see them around me. And then it occurred to me that, you know, the entrepreneurs that I mentioned there earlier, Mary Davis, Sister Stan, Father Peter McVerry, they got going in the 60s and 70s, and times were different then, and many of them had a background in the religious orders. And I think what matters there is that if you're in a religious order, you do have a roof over your head and a hot meal every evening without having to worry about where it's going to come from. And yeah, and so I felt like that had an influence on maybe why the next generation weren't coming through. And also we were at the height of the Celtic Tiger in 2004 and 5. And it was concerning that parents and peers were maybe more concerned around life choices that built your status in society or indeed your economic security, and that maybe there wasn't room for people who wanted to pursue other avenues, or at least there wasn't moral support and encouragement for them, whatever about finance. And so it seemed like there was a need to look at cultivating that next generation of social entrepreneurs to create the space and a bit of moral support and credit as well as maybe some practical supports to help them emerge. At the same time, when I was in the US, I was given a copy of a book that Paul O'Hara beside me will be very familiar with called How to Change the World, Social Entrepreneurs and the Power of New Ideas by a man called David Bornstein, and which is based on the Ashoka story. And that was hot off the press. And the case studies in that, I just thought, we have these people, but I'm worried about the next generation. So it just seemed like it was a fit for our perceptions of Ireland at that moment. And Declan Ryan, who's the co-founder of One Foundation with me, has an investor background, and he understands how to back entrepreneurs, to grow their businesses and to grow innovations in Ireland and in a global context as well, mainly through aviation, but also other areas. And my background was in the voluntary sector, raising finance for organisations like Barnardo's. And it was clear to us that backing individuals with entrepreneurial qualities and with innovations could solve some of the social problems that were really both entrenched or increasingly emerging in Ireland, right in the middle of the Celtic Tiger, but somebody needed to act. And the model seemed simple. Social entrepreneurs really need the same supports as entrepreneurs do, and that's not a model that anybody has to invent. We have venture capital funds, we have angel investors, we have Enterprise Ireland, we have lots of different kinds of supports for entrepreneurs and business. But there was nothing like that for social entrepreneurs or for people acting in the social sector. And more particularly, there was no moral support as well. So there was no practical support, no targeted finance, but there was also no moral support. I wasn't seeing my parents or parents, the next generation younger from me, saying to their children when they left college or when they did their leaving cert, you know, you should really look at what you can do for society. There was a lot of pressure to be a doctor or a lawyer or work in a bank or whatever it might be. And people weren't really being encouraged and praised to take that risk as a career choice and a life choice. And so, to cut a long story short, we invited Ashoka to come to Ireland and we supported them in their early years, and we also incubated Social Entrepreneurs Ireland under Sean Coughlan's leadership. And later we decided to replicate Social Entrepreneurs Ireland in Vietnam. So, 10 years later, what have we learned? Because Sean and Paul and other people have really led the social entrepreneurship movement, and we've stepped back from that because we didn't need to do that. But what we have gotten focused on then was the growth capital for nonprofits. And I wanted to say a bit about what we've done and what are the barriers and opportunities that we see now as a result of that work. So over 10 years, One Foundation has provided more than 35 organisations in Ireland with growth capital to make a step change in their impact, right across youth mental health, children and families, integration of minorities, and, as I mentioned, social entrepreneurship. And for example, we set ourselves 8 ambitious goals, and just to give you one example, transform youth mental health services in Ireland was one of those. So I wanted to say a little bit about what are the supports we've provided and why did we do them. And we call them our investment model. So what I'll do is just give you a case study rather than a big long theoretical explanation perhaps. So we've used a model of support that replicates the support provided by venture capital backers in business. And we know that high-performing entrepreneurs or non-profit organisations need the same things as for-profit companies. What are they? They need growth capital, and they need that at a scale that's meaningful, a decent amount of money. They need technical supports that enable them to put that money to work hard. Things like business planning, impact measurement systems, things like that that help them really work that growth capital hard. And thirdly, they need networks that can bring other inputs to the table, board members, capital, recruitment, talent, that kind of thing. So the example I want to use is Belong To Youth Services. Some of you may be familiar with them. They're based here in Dublin, and they provide youth services to the LGBT community. Originally in Dublin, and they've now grown so that that's available throughout Ireland. And we invested, and I'm going to put inverted commas around that because we're a grant maker and we provide grants and we don't look for any financial return. But we always view it as investment because we want to know what's the social return on investment, and we want to be able to name and measure that in our grants. So we invested in Belong to help it grow its network of youth services for LGBT young people from Dublin only nationally. And when we first got involved with them in 2006, they were providing Sunday afternoon programs and youth work that were drop-in for young people here in Dublin, and people were getting the bus from Donegal and back in one day. They were so desperate to access that service. And so it was just obvious that it was needed, but there was no money. And we know that if 5 to 10% of the population is LGBT, that meant there were 42,000 young people in Ireland between 14 and 23 who, if they lived outside Dublin, didn't have anywhere to go to get support. So it was a pretty obvious need. And right at the time when we know separately from other evidence that mental health problems are most likely to emerge during adolescence, and we knew that there's much higher risk of suicide and self-harm for that group as well, right at that age group. So we invested 1.425 million, so almost €1.5 million over 6 years in Belong To. And that's a big number, but it wasn't all in one go. We broke it down, and each time we did a 3-year investment, as we call it, but it was a grant. It was focused on a different stage of their development. But to summarise, we wanted them to expand their youth services from Dublin to nationwide, to ensure the Department of Education came on board to combat homophobic bullying, to change public attitudes and promote solidarity among young people, befriending basically, and to increase their fundraising capacity so they could be strong after we left. And specifically, going back to our investment model and using this as an example, we provided 100,000 first over a year to strengthen their core staff and test their ability to deliver. They did great on that. So we then paid for them to do an ambitious business plan where they could set out in writing and drill through in detail what were their ambitious goals and how were they going to achieve them in detail, and how would they know, how are they going to measure. What would it take, how long would it take, how many more staff, what would they be doing, all that stuff. It's harder than it seems to do that kind of thing. And then when we saw that plan and we liked it, we said, okay, we'll contribute $750,000 now to hire the staff, to grow the services nationally, to train the youth workers and all the other youth organisations that needed that training, fundraising, communications, campaigning, all that stuff. but it was all about strengthening the organisation to achieve their big mission. It was an investment in the core strengths of the organisation, but a lot of the time that's called overhead. We call it growth capital. And I think I really want to draw your attention to that, that a lot of the time in the media and other places, organisations are told they have too much overhead. But if you look at a business, that's never called overhead. That's called what you need to grow and build your mission. So overhead, the way it gets defined, often is a good thing and not a bad thing. And we're very happy to support that kind of thing. And I really want to draw attention to you today on that. We followed it with a second round of investment. I've had 500,000 to take the growth to the next stage. And by now they're in dialogue with political parties in the Department of Education on a campaign to tackle homophobic bullying in schools. And essentially, they have now achieved all the objectives we invested in. We've seen the guidelines come out of the Department of Education. They're engaged with combating homophobic bullying in schools, belong to, have expanded nationally. They're now reaching 2,700 young people a year. 3,000 would probably be the number they need to reach. So they're very close to right where they need to be. We are really happy with their success, and they've been a brilliant organisation. But I suppose we also believe that we, together with the state, put in the right money at the right time to make that happen. So what we did was we put in the risk capital. And we understand, and I think it's really important to think about the role of philanthropy in a social democracy like Ireland. We can be the risk capital. The state has the Controller and Auditor General crawling all over its money. It's very hard for the state to take risks. Because, of course, risk capital is going to fail sometimes. It's going to fail quite often, actually. So it's very hard for the state to take that risk, but that's where philanthropy can take that risk. And that can take the form of growth capital. And once that's proven effective, so once Belong To has grown and we can see that they actually do work, the state can then choose, if they believe in those services, to pick up the funding of those. But basically, we've taken the risk. So what have we learned? Ireland can hold its head high on a track record of social innovation. And you're going to hear some examples in a few minutes about that. And a lot of these have been developed by social entrepreneurs. But they still face barriers. And what are they? The first is there is a lack of growth capital in Ireland. For the next generation, we only worked in very specific areas. We didn't work on lots of other areas. And there is a lack of philanthropic growth capital in Ireland. And particularly at the scale. And so our average grant was €750,000. That's a lot of money. Not many philanthropies are giving out that kind of money in Ireland. And we're closing. And you can't grow an organisation based on funds committed year by year, and that's how the state works right now. So growth capital is not enough, and it's drying up. The second is that the model of supports provided by venture capital for entrepreneurs is just not available to social entrepreneurs in Ireland. And certainly not at the scale it needs to be. So funds provided need to be structured right. They need to be available for what gets called overhead, but isn't. Management salaries, marketing, IT, all that stuff. Technical supports need to be wrapped around those. And we're going to hear more about that from Social Entrepreneurs Ireland, Ashoka. And entrepreneurs need access to mentoring and to networks. And then the third thing that I want to emphasise is that state contracts for social services need to be clearer in their commissioning criteria in order to give new entrants a fighting chance of winning them. And especially funding should be more often contingent on the outcomes that are delivered rather than historic funding relationships. And we see that happening right across the commissioning bodies across the state in social services, many departments, Department of Health, Department of Education, Department of Social Protection, and many more, housing, etc. So we need to move away from, we've always funded them, so they must be good, and we know them well, to actually who can be the best provider of these services based on outcomes and value for money. And we really haven't made that move in Ireland yet, and it's a very significant challenge, but it's something we need to do. So finally, and just to conclude, Ireland's Forum on Philanthropy has been developing a National Social Innovation Fund, which will be launched later this year. And the role of the Social Innovation Fund is to provide more growth capital into the market not just in specific areas, but actually for Ireland's best social innovations. And so they couldn't be in any area. And this is something that's being developed under the auspices of Minister Phil Hogan, who appointed the Forum on Philanthropy to really look at how can we stimulate Philanthropy Ireland and what's the best use of it. And so I think where the Seanad could really help is to get behind that initiative as it emerges. We believe that it should get launched in the second half of this year sometime. But I think, as we all know, nothing's launched till it's launched. And it's hard times in Ireland. So we believe the money can be found and will be found, but I think anything that the Seanad can do to back that initiative, because we can have all the networks and technical supports we like, but if we don't actually have the growth capital that goes with them, they'll find it hard to make a difference. So I'll close with that, and thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Just to say that took all of 18 minutes, so members of the committee first want to ask a question. And I'm confined to questions. Anyone that wants to make a speech from the floor here, I'll cut them out. There's nobody. I'll ask Fidel Mahil-Eames and Fiach McAneil.
Chairman Gormagat, and thank you very much for hosting this session today. I'm delighted to welcome One Foundation, Ashoka Ireland and Social Entrepreneurs Ireland here today. Last spring, I went along to Farmley and met Ashoka Ireland and the Change Nation process. I was blown away by what you were setting out to do here in Ireland, and I was blown away because of the potential it had by bringing solutions that we need here.
Made their presentation.
I understand, but One Foundation has acknowledged.
I just want to make it clear, and I made it clear to the members before I came in, you were late coming in, that I'm allowing no speeches, you ask questions. Otherwise, we will not be here, and some people...
Question.
Okay,
thank
please,
you.
yeah.
I just want to thank you for hosting the event today. I'm conscious, directing to One Foundation, that you close at the end of this year. That's of concern, obviously. Is there time for projects that would meet your criteria to present to you at this point? I'm particularly thinking of projects around young people, around creativity in particular, and around the needs that this country needs, where our young people can make a major difference. And in presenting that project, have you a review team, that they could present to? That's my question. Thank you.
Margaret, I'll bank the first three questions and you can take them then. Susan and Fiach then.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you very much. I suppose a little bit of clarity maybe around that idea of measuring the social return. I mean, I see that you would have set targets and you'd have worked with Belong To, for example, and said you need to be nationwide, you need to be this, you need to be that. But that feels to me like a project with an end, and I can't quite work the entrepreneur element, except for the change in the language. Let's not call it overhead, let's call it something else. So if we sat down with a project and said, here are some targets, here's some money to achieve them, and we check that you're achieving them, I don't know how that, I don't know where the turn into social entrepreneurship comes. So I'm sorry, forgive me, I don't quite get it. It's not that I don't believe it, I just don't quite get it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Senator Fiach McAneil.
Thanks, Deirdre. Obviously, you've highlighted the biggest risk now, which is the lack of philanthropic growth capital. And you spoke about an initiative, particularly around how we might move forward the recommendations from the Forum on Philanthropy, the Flannery report. Could you just be more specific? Okay, just pretend we're the Dáil, right, of the Seanad, and actually just talk to us about. It is a crisis. Not only are you finishing this year, winding down, but obviously we know the electric philanthropies are shutting down, and so there is a kind of there's a crisis now, of which I think I'd like to hear. If you were the minister, what would you do? Because certainly there's a philanthropic initiatives from the Department of Arts, Sports and Arts Heritage. There's philanthropic